Hello, I'm Emily. Since Gunnar hates the sound of his own voice, I will be telling you about the country of Iraq on his behalf. Iraq is a country in the Middle East with a population of 33.4 million people. Its neighbors include Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, and Turkey. Iraq is not only holy ground for Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike, but also home to the Tower of Babylon, and where written language was invented by its former people, the Sumerians. Iraq is governed by a federal parliamentary republic, and its president is Fuad Massam. Iraq's economy is dominated by the oil sector. The economy is still currently going through growing pains since the fall of tyrant Saddam regime in 2003. Despite being slow, there are changes being made for enacting economic policy. As of now, as much of 25% of Iraq's population is below the country's poverty line, and about 16% is unemployed. This would make it 158th in the world for unemployment. The word Iraq in Arabic means deeply rooted, well-watered, and fertile. After Saddam was overthrown in 2003, a vacuum of media content was created. A restriction on satellite TV was lifted, and this soon became the largest consumption of media in the country, with 97% of households having access to it. Apart from that, 50% of households have access to internet, and 35% have access to radio. Also, 92% of the population have mobile phones, and 35% of those with mobile phones have access to the internet through them. Because of the new access to technology, Iraqis who spent decades isolated from information are now connected. News has become one of Iraq's most popular forms of entertainment, and television is the most common way that they consume it. Roughly 92% of Iraq's citizens watch TV on a weekly basis, while only about 1 in 5 say that they listen to it on the radio. In a poll, 50% of Iraq citizens say that they follow the news a lot, while another 22% of the polled population say that they follow the news somewhat. Iraqis' trust in the news varies from region to region based on who is in charge of its media. Much of the media in Iraq is owned by government entities, religious groups, or by Islamist extremist groups, especially in rural areas. There are also privately owned media groups emerging slowly. The 3 most popular networks in Iraq are Al-Iraqiyya, Al-Sharqiyya, and Al-Samiria. Viewership tends to be based on an individual's religious sect and political alignment. The most popular network in Iraq is Al-Sharqiyya, which airs a range of Iraqi original content from news, dramas, and comedies. The only content on the network that isn't created by Iraqis are the cartoons that it airs. Al-Sharqiyya is owned by an Iraqi businessman, Saeed Bazaz. Bazaz is no stranger to the media business in Iraq. From 1990 to 1992, Bazaz headed to the state media under Saddam's rule. Bazaz was forced to flee the country in 1992 after he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt that was ordered by Saddam. Documentary-style reality TV is popular in Iraq. One of the most popular shows in the country is called In the Grip of the Law. In this show, producers take convicted terrorist bombers to sites that they destroyed. All under the supervision of law enforcement, and while locked in chains, these terrorists walk through their plans and how they carried out the attack. The terrorists are often confronted face-to-face by survivors of the incident, which creates a powerful image, to say the least. This show was spearheaded and funded by the Iraqi government in an attempt to reduce car bombings, which happen almost every day in Iraq. According to Freedom House, Iraq is not a free country. Despite freedom of expression and freedom of press being guaranteed in the Iraqi constitution, that comes second to what the government considers a violation to public order or a violation of morality. This has led to imprisonment of journalists who question the government in military actions against terrorist groups. Because of this fear, many news stations tend to lean toward government actions of eradicating enemies. These are fears of imprisonment or their station being shut down. In just 2015, at least 5 journalists lost their lives from doing their jobs. According to Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions, Iraq has a power distance score of 95 out of 100. Power distance is in reference to how a person perceives their boss. A high power distance means that an employee looks at their boss as a ruler rather than a friend. They are quick to obey what they say and don't question their authority. As a comparison reference, the U.S. scores a 45 in this field. When scored on individualism, Iraq scores a 30. Once again, for reference, the U.S. scores a 91 in this field. This means that Iraq works for the betterment of society rather than the betterment of self. This also references whether a person would like to stand out in a crowd or blend in. In Iraq, it is more preferred to blend in. When it comes to masculinity, the U.S. and Iraq aren't that different. Iraq scores a 70 while the U.S. scores a 62. This means that both countries have a preference for heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for one's success. Iraq has an uncertainty avoidance of 85 in comparison to the U.S.'s score of 46. This means that Iraq is much slower than the U.S. to accept change and follows a relatively strict code of behavior and status quo. Another area that Iraq is similar to the U.S. on the Hofstede scale is short-term orientation. Iraq scores a 25 and the U.S. scores a 26. Both countries are considered short-term rather than long-term, meaning that they both honor traditions and are slow to change. When it comes to indulgence versus restraint, Iraq is considered very restrained at a score of 17 in comparison to the U.S.'s score of 68. This measure is defined by gratification of basic and natural human desires that are considered enjoyable. Since 2003, Iraq has gone through some major changes, and it will be interesting to see how their use of technology and media consumption evolve over the coming years.